Gravity is the root of lightness, stillness the ruler of movement. Therefore, a wise prince, marching the whole day, does not go far from his baggage wagons. Although he may have brilliant prospects to look at, he quietly remains in his proper place, indifferent to them. How should the lord of a myriad chariots carry himself lightly before the kingdom? If he do act lightly, he has lost his root of gravity. If he proceed to active movement, he will lose his throne. One of the main principles of Taoism that we read a lot about is cultivating stillness of mind, heart, and body. This stillness often makes a stark contrast with the constant hustle and bustle of the world around us. For a Taoist though, stillness does not mean inaction. The first line of chapter 26 of the Tao Te Ching tells us that stillness is the ruler of movement. For a Taoist, the cultivation of inner quiet is not for the sake of never doing anything. Rather, the master understands that stillness is the root of action in its purest and most effortless form. Stillness forms the basis for being able to act in the most effortless and efficacious way. Looking at chapter 26, I want to quickly draw your attention to the third line. Therefore, a wise prince, marching the whole day, does not go far from his baggage wagons. This line has quite a variation in translations when you look at different sources, and I think this leads to a decent amount of confusion. I've even seen this line translated as, "Thus the master travels all day without leaving home." After looking at quite a number of different translations though, the most common rendering seems to be this idea of traveling all day without leaving the baggage carts. Personally, however, I don't think that Lao Tzu was just giving us travel advice. Another translation in particular that seemed to shed some light on this part for me was one that renders the line as, "Wherefore, while the sage proceeds the whole day according to Tao, he never departs from either calmness or gravity." When we look at the other translations through this light, a new meaning begins to emerge, one that actually seems to kind of tie all these other meanings together. To my eyes, it seems like Lao Tzu is using the idea of traveling but staying close to the baggage carts as a metaphor. It feels to me like he uses this analogy to invoke an image of a person going about, traveling, living his or her life, but while doing so, remaining close to their center. In other words, a sage can go about traveling and taking care of whatever duties are required of him or her, while still maintaining a state of quietness, openness, and softness, or a meditative-like state. This state leaves one open to feeling intuition, observing the world as it is, and not forcing themselves upon it, or becoming overly caught up in its many distractions. If you've ever traveled somewhere that you've really liked, you may be able to relate to what I'm about to say here. I was super lucky as a child in that I got a lot of opportunities to travel around my native country of the United States. My parents were really smart about figuring out ways to work family vacations into errands my dad could run for his work. And around once a year, they would turn one of these errands into a trip where we could go somewhere where we had never been. Throughout our travels, I remember several occasions of being in places where I was almost overwhelmed with things to look at, listen to, and experience. One of these for me was the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. I remember running around from thing to thing, anxious to inhale the next bit of novelty. Maybe you've experienced something similar at an amusement park or a museum as a child. It's a ton of fun to visit places where there are so many things to grab and hold your attention. However, as we travel through life, we find this happening on a sort of broad, general scale, and in this case, it can start to become a bit of a problem. There are 1,000,001 things to get distracted by in our lives. News articles and programs, social media, long checklists of to-dos that aren't really that important in the big picture. These things can suck us right in if we're not careful. They can start to take over our lives by influencing our moods, dominating our thought lives, and crowding out the things that really matter. If we're not careful, we can lose ourselves in the many distractions that present themselves to us. When this happens, we become less wise and less in control of ourselves. We start to equate these things with real life, while passing over the things that really do matter. Real life, whatever that is, isn't found in headlines, reels, or errands. Real life is found when we peel the distractions off our eyes and look and see what is in front of us. I like to call this process hitting the windshield wipers, because it reminds me of the moment when you hit the wipers for the first time in a week or two, and have this moment of realizing how murky your windshield really was, and how much clearer you can see now that you've cleaned it. Often we don't realize how distracted we are until we really let go of the distractions. I think this is one reason why it feels so good to meditate. If you have any experience with meditation, as many of you likely do, you will have an idea of what I mean. Often after a really good meditation, you just get this feeling of freshness and lightness, like taking a breath of fresh air. Meditation is an excellent way of teaching our bodies and minds to be quiet and centered. However, when we think about meditation, A lot of times we get the idea that it's just something we do for 15 minutes a day. However, meditation is much more than that. These daily 15-minute sessions, or however long you do them, are not really supposed to be sessions at all in my opinion. At least not in the sense of being an activity that starts and ends within the parameters of the session, and then is put aside for the rest of the day. Part of the point of these meditation sessions is to train our minds and bodies to attain to a state of softness, openness, and quietness that can eventually permeate our entire day. The 15-minute sessions are intensive practice of a skill that hopefully will at some point become second nature and automatic. Whether we're sitting alone, shopping for groceries, talking to a friend, or writing a report for work. Meditation is not just meant to be an activity, but a lifestyle, a way of being. It's a process of learning to stay grounded and anchored to the present moment. Learning to live in this state will cause us to naturally act our best, and will lead to a sense of calmness and satisfaction that we are living our lives in harmony with Tao. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all tomorrow for chapter 27. Peace and blessings.